This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal. In Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.
7 o'clock right on the button. It's almost like we planned it. I'm Rob Fay. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day, as always, powered by Booster Juice right here on TSN 1040. We will primarily talk baseball. We'll dip our toe into some of the other sports if we could, because I'm sitting beside an angry Italian tonight. Lou Filippo, none too pleased that the Raptors got jobbed. It wasn't even LeBron, he says. It's the men of the stripes. So I'm going to give Lou a forum for a good 13 seconds to vent on the Raptors. Lou, you're on the clock.
Embarrassing for the NBA.
All right,
That's
time's
all I'm
up. Good
say.
stuff, Lou. Good conversation. You know how this one's going to go. Soda's in the background. It's going to a DJ Marshmallow concert or something like that. All right. So let's get to it. Toronto Blue Jays in action today. Seattle Mariners in action today. KP Wee is going to join us in a few seconds. Niall O'Donohoe is going to join us in a couple of moments' time. We're locked, loaded, ready to go. We were supposed to have Kurt Appleby here today. And then Kurt Appleby, a little under the weather. 6 days he's been doing nothing but push-ups and sit-ups, getting ready to roll. And then all of a sudden, Rob, I can't make it. Like half an hour before the show starts. I'm like, where are you? I'm under the weather. I'm like, all right, man, what can I do? So next week, we'll be joined by Kurt Appleby, he of the morning show. So I don't know if you've heard this as you're driving around on 99, Highway 1, wherever you are this afternoon, this evening, but Ichiro is, I guess, retired? He's become the assistant something to the chairman of the Seattle Mariners. He's going to travel with the team. He's going to hang out with the players. He's going to wear a suit. But he is no longer an on-field part of the Seattle Mariners. I'm thinking a first-ballot Hall of Famer with one of the most unassuming, awkward retirements that I've ever heard of in my life, Lou. Am I off the mark on that?
When I first saw the story cross the wire, right, I'm taking a look at it, and I'm like, okay, something is missing from this story, because it just seemed very kind of like, okay, he's walking away now. Let's not even think that he's there. And I understand he's played elsewhere for the last little while, but this is arguably, their best player they've ever had. Definitely top three. And
I don't know if I'd put him up at the top of Mount St. Ken Griffey Jr., but I'd probably be top three.
But top three.
Perhaps.
And he's there with the team. Now, you always hear about guys signing contracts with their old team so they can retire with their old team, and you get the old press conference, and backslapping and all that. Not even that. This is kind of like, here's the press release, guys. Here's your piece of paper. Let's all be quiet. And I'm stunned.
Here's my problem. You have an opportunity here. If Ichiro was brought back because he's a bona fide part of this organization moving forward, as in he can contribute and help you go towards a playoff spot, then cool. But I think we all knew, as Ichiro was kind of working out in Japan, renting out stadiums, bringing all his buddies to throw him batting practice, that this really was a one-off. I thought 1-year deal, you let him retire as a Mariner, and you know what? It's a love-in. He does the circuit around the American League, dips his toe into the interleague play where he goes to the national side, and everybody gives Ichiro his due. I don't know if this is the, quote, Japanese way. I don't know what this comes from, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. I know that it's all about humility in the Japanese culture and that you don't want pomp and circumstance. You just simply say, I played the game to the best of my abilities and what have you. But I can't imagine 30-some-odd games into the season that all of a sudden, as you say, crossing the wire, all of a sudden news that Ichiro is essentially done. And not just done where they released him, but they're moving him up into the front office, which to me is just, it just misses a huge opportunity to land on this whole island of PR, of good PR. Instead, you're just going to say, oh, by the way, the guy in the suit, that's Ichiro.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely stunning. Like, we went through this not that long ago with, of course, the Sedin twins. And once again, you're talking about, a group of extremely classy individuals, Ichiro, the twins. But they even gave the fans here 2 games to say goodbye. And you would think that the Mariners would, at the very least, let him walk up to the plate one more time, put the bat in the air, and get the adulation from the crowd. Well, that's not going to happen. And it just, I really, really don't get it.
So the official statement is that he is, quote, transitioning from field to front office, and that the iconic outfielder is, quote, not retiring, and that his return next season is possible. This, to me, says that because they're going over to Japan to play a series at the Tokyo Dome, that this is their way of keeping the door open so it doesn't look awkward that they put him in a uniform and give him the opportunity to maybe then retire. That's the only thing that schematically makes sense to me is, you know what, we're going to shift him upstairs because obviously we need that roster spot. He's not contributing. He's a guy that's right around the Mendoza line. This is not how he wants to finish his major league career. So let's save a little face, put him upstairs, but then we'll send him home. We'll take him back to Japan. We'll let him have those couple of games in uniform, bow out graciously, and maybe that is how it ends. That, to me, is the only way that this makes sense to me. They've already filled his roster spot. But again, 27 seasons between Japan and the major leagues, 44-year-old icon, and fizzles like this. There has to be, as you said, a little bit more to the story.
You know, maybe it'll come out that that's the way that, say, Ichiro wanted to do it, in which case then it certainly gives some cover to the Mariners. But notwithstanding, if they do this thing and he retires officially in Japan, like, I'm not a Mariner fan. I'm a Blue Jay fan. If I was a Mariner fan and I heard Ichiro's coming back this year, and I was one of those guys on the fence, and I thought, hey, you know what? I remember the glory years. I'm going to get some season tickets. Right now, I am not feeling very good about the organization.
Well, because if it was an injury,
that's
cool.
Different.
That
that's
is
different.
completely
Absolutely.
different. But yeah, it just seems like there might have been a little bit of a lack of communication, which again, I'm not there. I don't know. All I know is today I saw that and I said to myself, that's odd. And that's really all you can say about it right now. Yeah. So again, we wish Ichiro the best. But the way that they described his job, before we move on to the next topic here, is that he will be around the team. He'll be hanging around the batting cage. He'll be traveling with the team. So he is a very key piece. I guess he's got to report back to the chairman. But I just sit there and I say to myself, well, let's rephrase this. This is what Ichiro said today. When I start using a cane, that's the time that I think I should retire.
That's a pretty good attitude, actually, if you think about it. And considering he still has the wheels, he just really can't make contact anymore. And he's not retired, which, I mean,
But he is retired. If you're walking around in the regular season wearing a suit and you're not rehabbing something, what does that say? To me, this is another misplay, because the reality is you either say, okay, what are the options here? That here's a guy hitting around the Mendoza line. Obviously, they're not going to option him.
No.
Obviously, they're not going to force him out the door. So you've got to do something to save face for a guy that came back to your organization and you maybe feel a little, heartstring tug to a guy that's 44 and was really struggling in the offseason, thinking that maybe he wasn't going to be able to come back to Major League Baseball. But I'm telling you right now,
this is not it.
You can't have him walking around the stadium that he is not retired from, being an ambassador for the game, and he's not playing. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. That would be, to equivocate this to all of our hockey listeners, a third of the way through the season, Daniel,
exactly,
you're not retired, but just walk around and kiss some babies and shake some hands.
Yeah.
And you know what? We'll let you travel with the team so that you can hang out with Henrik a little bit more. People here would be beside themselves. They wouldn't know what's going on, and they'd want an answer.
No, and it is. It's the same kind of situation, and hopefully something comes out at some point to try and explain this thing. But it really is. It's hard to find words to explain it, because I don't think we've ever seen anything like this, where you have a player that, quote unquote, transitions to the front office a couple of weeks into the season, and it's an iconic player. Like, it's.
Yeah.
It's not good for
baseball.
baseball.
It's not like Derek Bell. Is
no,
that what you're
it's
saying?
no, it's definitely not like Derek Bell.
All right, so you got to remember, he
Trenches.
re-signed with the Mariners this spring as a free agent right near the end of spring training. He's hitting .205. He's got 9 hits in 15 games this season. He was brought here primarily because Ben Gamel was injured. So Gamel comes off the DL. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and the Mariners really don't need 5 outfielders. So he hasn't gotten into many games, and they're looking at their, future, and obviously Ichiro's a one-off, and they decide that they're going to make this move. So They say, do the Mariners, we want to make sure that we capture all of the value that Ichiro brings to this team off of the field. This new role is a way to accomplish that. While it will evolve over time, the key is that Ichiro's presence in our clubhouse and with our players and staff improves our opportunity to win games. That is our number one priority, and it is also Ichiro's number one priority. That comes from GM Jerry DiPoto. That, to me, I don't know if I want to go Pete Rose. Remember when Pete Rose was the old player manager?
Well, okay, that ended in
Little bit different.
slightly different way.
It's so bizarre. But anyhow, you know what? We'll circle back on this with KP Wee. Niall O'Donohoe are going to join us in a couple of minutes' time. Actually, you know what? Maybe we should bring in KP to this conversation. We've got a few more things that we're going to get to. I didn't think the Blue Jays were going to play today. They were scheduled for a doubleheader. Then all of a sudden, the rains open up over Ohio. They've had a tough time weather-wise. And then all of a sudden, just when you think that, you know what, maybe the Toronto Blue Jays are starting to skid. Well, they win their opener. It takes them 11 innings to do it, and it is Yangervis Solarte with a grand slam that lifts Toronto in Game 1 to a victory. Solarte almost didn't make that plate appearance. He had to leave the game in the third inning when he slid like a young Oksana Bayul catching an edge. I repeat, a young Oksana Bayul. Anyways, he slid into third base and absolutely face-planted. Somewhere even Todd Stottlemyre was like, dude, that's a bad slide. He cut his upper lip. He had cuts on his nose. Looked like he went to the back alleys in Maine and Hastings, and all of a sudden comes out in the 11th inning and hits a grand slam, and they win the game. KP Wee, if you caught an edge in the third, would you hit a grand slam? No, that's not the question I have for you. KP, the Toronto Blue Jays right now are an interesting study because this is a division that is obviously Boston's and New York's. But yet Toronto, with their 18th win, and we're only at May the 3rd, are a very interesting proposition. So if I was to put $500 in your lap and know you're not allowed to go to the Roxy, would you bet on the Toronto Blue Jays grabbing that second wild card this year?
Rob, thanks for having me on. You got to think about who the Blue Jays are going to be competing against in the American League. Obviously, you have, like you said, Boston, New York, probably the top two teams in the Eastern Division. You have the Central Division winner, and you got perhaps Houston in the American League West. So we've got 4 strong teams right there, and there are 5 teams that make it to the playoffs in each league. So you're looking at perhaps the Angels. So do you think the Blue Jays and the Angels are they on par? Do you think the Angels are going to be better than the Blue Jays? I would say on paper the Angels, assuming they don't catch Houston in the American League West, would be the team to beat as far as being the second wild card. And of course the loser between Boston and New York would be the other wild card. So that's a question you have to think about. Are the Blue Jays at that level? Are they among the top 5 teams in the American League? And I don't see that happening. If I had $500, I would not bet on the Blue Jays being among the top 5 in the AL in the American League.
KP, you're so negative. I'm just joking. You're fine.
I don't disagree with them there. I mean, there's 3 numbers that really stand out with this team there: 619, 660, and 752, and that's the ERA of 3 of their 5 starters. If your starting pitching is giving up 6 runs a game earned, you're really not going to go anywhere. I mean, this is kind of the old mirrors, and I wish I could think of the term here. But
smoke and mirrors?
Smoke and mirrors, I mean, they've done a lot of little things to get through games. I mean, they win 13-11 today. Generally, you give up 11 runs, you're not winning a game. And there's a lot of bad signs pointing here. You hope they can turn it around.
Even in the loss against the Twins, where Stroman had actually a good start when he gave up 2 runs on 7 hits. Sorry, 2 runs in 7 innings, I should say. He was getting hit hard in the early going, and I think that's a concern. He's been pitching behind a lot. Ball 1, ball 2, 2-1, 3-1. So for guys like Stroman, for example, who's been like falling behind hitters, these are major league hitters, and they're gonna crush if you throw it down in the strike zone, they're gonna hit you hard, and that's what's been happening to Stroman so far this season. And it's despite that good outing that he had against the Twins on Wednesday a couple of days ago, or that was yesterday. Yeah, I agree with Lou in terms of there being warning signs with the pitching staff.
I look at it like this. I look at Marcus Stroman's numbers, and you know what? ERA is sometimes misleading. You have one bad game, takes a couple to get it back down into comfortable numbers. Like, for example, he dropped his ERA, despite losing today, by almost a run and a half. So, I mean, the reality is that. I mean, he was 888. He's going to go to bed tonight at 752. The numbers that make me a little bit concerned are the earned runs. And I know that translates directly to ERA, but I just only bring it up by a comparable. He's already given up 27 earned runs this season. He only gave up 69 earned runs in 201 innings last year. So, again, I'm not worried about earned runs as far as an average goes, but I just look at the fact that he just can't seem to stop the bleeding. He walks more than he walked last year. Opposing hitters are hitting nearly 275 off of him. Nobody's scared or nobody's getting fooled by Marcus Stroman anymore. So Stroman comes in, he dominates for the first couple of seasons. You could even say, like, I don't, maybe dominate's too strong a word, but he was at least a presence on the mound. He's worked on his mechanics. It hasn't paid off. And now all of a sudden you look around and you say to yourself, you're 0-4 with a 7.52, and you're giving up, more than a hit per game. Maybe you've done too much tweaking. Maybe you're a little too fancy. Maybe it's time to get back to the meat and potatoes. Or if you are a guy like Mark Shapiro, you wonder if he might be trade bait down the road.
Well, considering that he's still, he's a year away from arbitration. He's a year away from free agency. And considering the talent he's shown over the early part of his career, and you have to love the attitude he has. Those are the kind of guys you give a little bit more slack to. But it's not a good sign because
But what is Marcus Stroman's attitude? I don't mean to cut you off. I mean, Marcus Stroman shows well on social media. I don't know if Marcus Stroman has the ear of the entire Blue Jays clubhouse.
No, but on the mound, he is someone who is aggressive, and he's certainly someone who gets excited and into it. You see the reaction at the end of innings when he gets out of them. This is a guy that I know they all want to succeed, but you see him out there, and you see that true kind of 110%, and that he's giving it.
But how much longer can he do that?
Well,
how much longer can you hop around and tweet at will when you're 0-4, 0-5, 0-6?
And you're giving up 8 runs a game.
So this is my problem. So, KP, I mean, we'll stay away from that because I don't want to make this as a personal assassination of Marcus Stroman. But the reality is you look at the controllability of a player, and you would say that Marcus Stroman is almost off limits. Some would say he could be potentially the ace of the staff. Some would say that there's no way that you would trade somebody that's just 27 that's already got the pedigree that he's got. But if I'm Ross Atkins, if I'm Mark Shapiro, and I'm truly bought into this rebuild, which they're a year away from if they don't do some damage here by the trade deadline, you can get rid of a handful of players here. Is he on the radar, or am I completely losing my mind?
Well, first of all, Rob, you have to think about where does he fit in the long-term plans? Is he going to be one of the guys that you project that's going to continue to throw 200 innings per season? Is he going to break down the road? What is his trade value in terms of what can you get in return for him? Is it at a peak right now, or whatever the case may be? So you have to really sit down and think about how long do you think he's going to continue to give you 200 innings or pitch quality starts, give you quality starts, quality innings over the course of a season. That's something you really have to think about. And, again, he's gone off to a very poor start this season. And as you mentioned, 1 or 2 bad starts can really raise that ERA. So you got to sit down and think about, is he going to get the job done? Is he part of the long-term plans? And if not, then you might consider moving him if you believe that he's going to be there and continue to be, giving you innings, quality innings, then you keep them.
All right, we'll take a break here. KP Wee, Lou Filippo will join us back in a couple of segments from now when we get to our bullpen sessions. But on the other side of the break, I'm going to bring in Niall O'Donohoe because there is one pressing question that continues to gain steam when it comes to the minor leagues of the Toronto Blue Jays system. What do you do with Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Vladdy just can do no wrong at AA. And now they're banging the drum to get him to Toronto stat. I will ask Niall if he thinks that's a good idea or not, as we're having a little Blue Jay and Mariner talk. This is Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice on TSN. We'll do this till 9 o'clock, and then, of course, we'll switch gears to a little Rob Fay Nation Radio, where we get you caught up in the entire world of sports. We'll talk basketball, football, hockey, you name it. We will at least try to jam it in from 9 till 11. But right now it is Vancouver Canadians Game Day, as always powered by Booster Juice. And we want to give some stuff away. The ticket guy at the ballpark hates when we do this segment, but I don't care. It's about you. So if you're driving around right now, I don't know what part of town you're in. Maybe you're listening online. Heck, any way you want to do it. 604-280-1040, 604-280-1040. To caller 5 right now, I have got a pair of tickets to each of the 4 Superstar Series that we have this season. There are 4 guys that are coming to Vancouver, so this essentially is 8 tickets in total, 2 to each of these games, which to me is a pretty good giveaway. You get to see the likes of Cliff Floyd, Mookie Wilson, former American League MVP Justin Morneau, and then you get JP Arancibia. Arancibia might be scraping. He's a good guy. But at the same time, you get a pair of tickets to each of these, Corey Basso. We have full boards. If you're trying to call in, my apologies, but we do have our winner, unless he hangs up before we get there. My thanks to everybody that is listening. Niall O'Donohoe covers the Toronto Blue Jays. He also covers the minor league system as good as anybody that I know. Niall, how are you tonight?
Doing great. Yourself?
I'm fine. Okay, we're getting through. The $1 million question right now is about the $1 million baby.
Yes.
And we're speaking about Vladimir Guerrero Jr., that the Blue Jays were lucky enough to get at a real young age, and he has exceeded expectations at realistically every single level that he has been a part of. I mean, it is really impressive to see what Vladdy's doing. Hitting, 383 at AA New Hampshire right now, had a home run tonight. I mean, the world's his oyster. So all of a sudden, you see this Blue Jay team that is, for some reason, hanging around the American League East. Looks like they're going to lose the nightcap of a doubleheader after winning the first game. And they'll probably wake up tomorrow 18-14. Still hanging around in the American League East. And now you've got this bona fide future star that is just ripping up AA. Niall, would you bring him up to the major leagues?
I would not. You know what? I mean, yes, he's doing great, but it's only 1 month, and I think it's maybe a little too soon to jump the gun. I mean, again, as you mentioned, he's only 19, and he's a tremendous talent. You just wonder, you wonder when is he going to slump? Because how is he going to be able to deal with that? You'd rather have him deal with that in AA instead of, putting too much pressure on him in Toronto, where he's expected to be a savior. And let's face it, where can you put him right now? I mean, Josh Donaldson is back, and boy, is he back with 2 home runs in this doubleheader.
Yes.
First base, Justin Smoke, he's got that locked down. So, I guess that was maybe the one thing you might question, like why they decided to put Vladdy at third base. Maybe why not first base? Maybe why not the outfield? There's always been this talk that scouts always had about, Guerrero's future at third base, whether he'd be good enough to stay there. But, yeah, I don't know. Where would you put him? That's the only question. Or to use him as DH. But that's kind of you hate to waste a guy as a DH like that. So
I got 2 trains of thought on this. By the way, at spring training, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, of the agility tests of all minor league infielders within the Toronto Blue Jays organization, I think they have like 46 or 47 of them. Vladdy in the agility test placed 5th.
Okay.
That big body,
yeah,
that big dumper, and yet he can still get down with the best of them. So from my perspective, pretty impressive. But here's the 2 scenarios where I think you may see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in a Major League uniform this year. One, let's say the Blue Jays get to the trade deadline or somewhere in and around, and they decide that they want to move Josh Donaldson. That will obviously be like ripping a Band-Aid off unannounced to a lot of the Blue Jays fan base. You need something to remedy that. And
Absolutely.
I think bringing up Vladdy would probably be an option there. The other one, the Blue Jays are in the race, and you expand your rosters come September. Why not bring up a bat like Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? Not an everyday player, but a guy that can come in and maybe that youthful spark. Marcus Stroman in spring training said that he and Bo Bichette were ready. And everybody just sat back and facepalmed because now you got a major league player that, of course, said, anointed, if I will, those 2 young players. I know that Marcus loves energy. He's a high-octane guy. You bring in youth, and what does youth bring? Energy, more octane. But I sit there and I think to myself, boy, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at 19, soon to be 20 years old, very dangerous proposition to bring him. But here's the other factor, is let's say that the Blue Jays are clunking in third or fourth place come September, and you've still got 15 to 16 home games to sell to an empty stadium. What would bring all the boys to the yard? Well, more than just a milkshake, as young Keelis used to say. It would be Vladimir Guerrero Jr. KP's looking on his iPhone to see if he has that song. I don't know. I see a couple of possibilities there.
Well, you look at service time. That's the big issue right there. Do they call them up? I mean, Ben Badler has gone on record from Baseball America saying Guerrero is a ready Major League bat right now. You know, you'd hate to do that just on the bottom line. You'd like to put the player's development first and foremost before you call them up. I mean, honestly, the goal is when you call somebody up, hopefully he's there to stay. That doesn't always happen in every case. But, yeah, he is an exciting talent. I mean, you saw what he did in Montreal, hitting that walk-off home run. And I think really that tells you right there. If he can perform in front of a packed house in Montreal, and I'll tell you what, I only been to Montreal once for an Expos game. It was in 2004. There's only, 6,000 people? It sounded like 60,000 people in that place. So I can only imagine what that was like when it was, 30, 40,000 at that game. Be able to perform like that in that kind of situation where his dad is king, I mean, that was unbelievable. But, yeah, it'd be very exciting. I mean, that's usually the one thing, unfortunately, being a Blue Jays fan during most of the century, when September rolls around, teams usually out of it. Oh, okay, who are they going to bring up? Who are the rookies that we can look forward to, trying to grasp for, hope for the future. But, yeah, I don't know. That's a tough call about
Okay,
Vladdy.
let me ask you this then. Is he untouchable?
Yes.
I know that he's untouchable, but he would bring back a king's ransom in return. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, it's
I
a good
watched
point.
Franklin Barreto leave this organization.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of blue chip guys leave the organization. You would be stupid to move Vladimir Guerrero Jr. just with the buzz alone, much less what he can actually do on the field for you. But I always say the old adage is nobody is truly untouchable. Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, once said everybody has a price. So my question is, what would it take to get Vladdy out of the Blue Jays organization?
At least a franchise player in return, at the very least. And, I mean, look, I think he's the real deal. I think everybody thinks he's the real deal. And you'd have to get at least franchise player and plus something else. What that is, I'm not sure, but it'd have to be at least franchise player. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like a Mike Trout equivalent, like a Bryce Harper equivalent. I know that's a big ask, but boy, you'd have to give up something really good if you were to convince me, if I were running the Blue Jays, to trade away Vladdy Jr.
Yeah, I can't possibly see that happening, but I just thought to myself, I wonder, kicking tires, what the ask would be on somebody for Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s ability. All right, so we've talked about the Toronto Blue Jays and their minor league system. We'll come back. We'll circle back on that in the second hour of the show, but I look at the Seattle Mariners, and right now we were talking about the fact that James Paxton is now bona fide the ace of this franchise. But I look at a guy like Felix Hernandez, and I see all the numbers, and I see what he did between the ages of 21 and 30, and I'm like, man, maybe one of the best pitchers that they've ever had. You could probably put him on the Mount Rushmore of pitchers that the Mariners have had in their career. And I don't even think that that's a tough thing for me to say. But that said, Felix Hernandez is a guy that I think still has value. But I don't know if I see value with him in Seattle, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Is he a movable piece? I know he's got big numbers as far as the dollars go, but Vladimir Guerrero Jr., unmovable. Felix Hernandez, to me, is a very intriguing piece. So I'll throw it to you.
Well, Felix Hernandez, that's interesting. I mean, obviously James Paxton, boy, what an effort he had last night. 16 Ks.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Set a record for most strikeouts in a game by a Canadian pitcher. Unbelievable. But, boy, you think about the Blue Jays missing out there. Boy, if they could have gotten him signed out of the draft. Boy, he would have looked really nice.
Along with Tyler Beede and Phil Bickford and all the guys.
Yeah. But you win some, you lose some, I guess. But
True.
But as for Felix, geez, I don't know.
Well, let me set this up for you. Felix Hernandez has one more year on his contract, one more big money year. Next year, he's worth $27.8 million. But he'll only be 33. I say that because the reality is even though he's got a lot of tread taken off that tire, if you think that you can be that team that can get a little more out of him, and you're a competitive team and you add Felix to the rotation, it's not the worst contract anymore in Major League Baseball, because the Mariners have chewed through the $22 million a year, the 25, the 26, the 27. So realistically, you prorate him to the trade deadline, he's probably an $8 to $10 million pickup with next year, and then you've got the $1 million team option in 2020. He's quickly becoming an intriguing piece if you think that you can get the value out of him in return. Would you buy on Felix Hernandez?
Yes. Yes, I would.
I would too.
I would too. I think he's still somebody he's an ace. He's always been an ace. Like since he came up when he was, 19, I believe it was. I remember seeing his very first start in Toronto and one hitting the Blue Jays, and that one hit was kind of questionable. But I think it was like one or two hitter. But as a 19-year-old to pitch that well, he was, and it still is unbelievable. And he's still the guy you look for on the Mariners rotation. Okay, is it a King Felix day? It's a happy Felix day. I mean, it usually turns out pretty well for the Mariners. Yeah, he is getting up there in age. He has lost a little bit off the fastball, but
he's 32.
Yeah.
See, the problem is everybody thinks Felix is like 37, 38 because of when he started. He made his Major League debut at 19 years old and had his first full season at 20. So his numbers this year, he's 4-2 for the Mariners with 38 innings and 33 strikeouts. Like, he's still putting the ball over the plate. I still see value in him. I know that he's got one more real ugly contractual year that might shy a few teams away. But if I'm the Yankees, if I'm the Red Sox, if I'm a team in the National League that maybe thinks that, wow, Felix hasn't seen a lot of these bats, maybe he's a guy that we can bring in for 1 year, I would put him immediately into that conversation, and I think that the Mariners would give him that opportunity.
I think maybe even the Astros, they've done it before, adding Justin Verlander, and they also went out and got Garrett Cole. What's to say they won't?
Could you imagine adding Felix Hernandez to that rotation? I mean, that would almost be too much. It would almost be unfair. All right, congratulations to Ryan Slattery out of New West. He is the winner of our tickets. We will get those tickets out to Ryan, and congratulations, and I appreciate everybody that called in trying to win those tickets here. And again, if you have questions, we're going to bring everybody back together on the other side of the break at 604-280-1040. If you want to talk Vladdy, if you want to talk Blue Jays, if you want to talk Mariners, this is Vancouver's only baseball-only show. It's Vancouver Canadians Game Day, powered by Booster Juice. So on the other side of the break, we'll start the bullpen sessions a little early. We'll bring in KP Wee, Lou Filippo, Niall. You'll stick around. I'll hang out for a little bit, and we'll do this until 9 o'clock. So on the other side of the break, we talked about this a little bit last week with regards to what ballparks need and all the other kind of stuff that comes with that. But as we move forward in our progression, is Toronto... How would I phrase this as a Blue Jay fan? How would I say this right? Is Toronto costing themselves games because of where they play? I'll flesh out what that means on the other side, but the reality is they play in a turf stadium that the players don't even like playing in. So the question is, if the Blue Jays were to switch gears and go all of a sudden to a different stadium, a Safeco-like, a Target Field, would that actually help in the wins category, and would it entice players who don't want to play on the turf to actually come to Toronto? We'll break that down next. You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day tonight on TSN. Just steps away from Vancouver's Nat Bailey Stadium. Pretty cool event that's going on this week. The Little League World Series teams, the entrants from Japan and Chinese Taipei, and of course the Little Mountains in this tournament as well, they're actually playing a round-robin series up at Little Mountain. I know we're not talking Major League Baseball, but I thought it was pretty cool. They had like 1,000 people there today, all with their Taiwanese flags cheering on Team Taiwan. And you've got Japan, you've got Chinese Taipei, you've got Korea all in town. So between now and the 6th, which I think is, Saturday, get out to Little Mountain Baseball and go watch some of the best 12, 13-year-old baseball that you'll ever see. I watched, I think, 2 innings today and marveled at the ability. I was not nearly that good when I was just getting into my teenage years. KP Wee, Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donohoe joining me right here on Canadians Game Day, and a couple of weeks away from the start of the Vancouver Canadian season, but we look ahead to what do we do to fill our time between now and opening day. Does that intrigue you? if somebody said, "Hey, man, go watch some amateur baseball up at Little Mountain," would that be something that you'd actually take part in? Because I was blown away by the number of people that were there tonight. That surprised me.
If I'd known about it, I would have tried to make a point of getting there and catching something. I mean, I think I grew up when the Little League World Series was a really, really big deal before they let 15-year-olds pitch in it. And it was like a Saturday event. It was on one of the major networks. You had one of the big sportscasting voices, Jim McKay, who would call it. And, I mean, I still remember some of the names and the guys who became stars there. I mean, Chris Jury pitched in the Little League World Series, won one. I mean, this is fantastic stuff to watch, and I wish they'd publicized it. I really do. It would have been really, really neat.
Well, we just did, so now you got to go.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll be honest. This is the first I've heard about it. Rob, I did see your picture on Twitter there with the Canadian Goose there in mid-flight.
It was amazing. So picture this. You got all these Taiwanese players out there. They've only been in Canada a couple of days. And then I think it was like top of the second, a whole flock of Canadian geese just landed right around second base. And the crowd started laughing, and the players didn't know what to do. So the umpire started chasing one of the geese, and the other geese just kind of kept watching. And then the players started chasing around the geese, and the whole crowd was loving it. It was actually pretty. The most Canadian thing I've seen all day, as I tweeted. But KP, I look around at this neck of the woods, and you talk about what we've seen from Hastings Little League, Wally Little League, all that kind of stuff. Always seems to be BC that's representing Canada at the Little League World Series, or at least, between them and Ontario. But I always think to myself, if you ever want to get back to the grassroots of the game, it's cool just kind of hang out and watch a game out at a ballpark. When is the last time, and maybe I'm asking the wrong person, but when's the last time that you've actually stopped to smell the roses and just watched an amateur baseball game? Be honest.
I would say hockey I have numerous times. At baseball, I have to think back to this.
Hockey's okay, though.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun to watch amateur hockey. I know we're not talking about hockey right now, but I couldn't tell you when the last time was in terms of baseball at the amateur level. But again, same with the guys here. Didn't know about it until today, until saw the little tweet that you had on Twitter, and talking about it just now. If they had publicized it, maybe it would have been good for anybody to go down there and catch a couple of innings here and there just to see what it's all about.
Good. So I'm glad that you guys said that, because it brings me to my next point. What will it take for amateur baseball in this country to start to make headway when it comes to communicating? And I think that there's a trickle-down effect here from Baseball Canada through to Baseball BC / BC Minor Baseball all the way down, because in 2018, I have two kids, 15-year-old, 13-year-old. They don't look up from their phones unless they're looking up at the TV because they're playing Fortnite. So is this a case of, maybe it's just the older generation coaches, the board directors or what have you, they just don't understand how to communicate? Because the reality is you've got the best teenage teams on earth at 33rd and Main this week, and nobody at this table outside of myself knew about that, and I only know about it because they're 150 feet away from my office. But is that something that we have to do a better job at? Is it the media's fault? Is it the organizer's fault? Or is it just lack of interest? We don't even look for that stuff when it's right under our nose.
I think there's a little bit of blame to go all around. I mean, there's no question that it certainly has not been publicized well enough. Now, whether that's the fault of the organizers or they've tried it, and quite frankly, local media hasn't bitten into it. But I mean, what's happened with local media in the last little while, I mean, it's just basically whittled down.
That's kind of a good point, not to cut you off, but that's a good point. We rely a lot on Facebook and Twitter, when in actuality, in the old days, you would have a reporter that would know that that's coming up. Maybe there's a feature profile. I mean, you have the defending world champions. And I know that this isn't bringing a Major League Baseball team here, but Niall, let's think about this. You have Japan here, who won the Little League World Series. You're seeing the best team on earth at 33rd in Canby or 33rd in Maine. You want to split the difference, and nobody knew about it. Maybe that's our fault that we didn't get ahead of this story.
Well, as Lou alluded to, with media being cutbacks. You see that with the newspapers. Sports sections are going down, and which is sad. And I think that's a big part of it. But I guess at the same time, you really have to work extra hard to really promote, whether it be through social media, whether you get a big flashy website. But yeah, I mean, there's just so much, it's just a different world, unfortunately. I mean, yeah, growing up, you got, I remember it'd take forever reading the Toronto Star and Toronto Sun sports sections. It would take up practically your entire Sunday afternoon. Now you don't really have that. I mean, you have a wealth of options on the internet to read whatever, but yeah, it's kind of sad that way. And of course, in smaller towns, it's cutbacks. You see that with the newspaper, sports sections getting smaller, and it's sad.
All right, KP, someone's coming at you on 104040, where, of course, you can text us. We talked about bringing up Vladimir Guerrero Jr., maybe not necessarily at UKP, but I'll let you have first shot at this one. Deep from Merritt says, I see this as a problem when Troy Tulowitzki gets back. He can still be a serviceable hitter, but not durable enough to play shortstop nowadays. But Tulo's best asset is his strong arm. He can let the lasers go all day at the on the left side of the infield. But if I'm the Blue Jays, and KP, this is where I'll bring you in, this is bizarre. I put Tulo at third. I move Josh Donaldson to the outfield. And then I bring Vladimir Guerrero Jr. up as well.
Wow.
If Machado, Harper, and Trout can come up young, why can't Vladdy?
Well, you're asking guys to play out of position, and
multiple guys out of position.
This may work in Stratomatic, but I don't see this happening in a real major league on a real major league team. Just because guys wouldn't want to move, wouldn't want to switch positions. They have their own comfort zone, and
well, you have Tulowitzki who's gone on record saying, "I'm going to be a shortstop or nothing at all."
Yeah, I mean they'll all say that, but let's look at moving Donaldson to the outfield. The guy's got a bad shoulder. So now you're going to have him throw the ball 250 feet
in a free
instead
agent
of 90.
year.
Like, yeah, that's really, really good. And let's put the Twins on defense since we've got to keep them around. Like, no, it's just not going to happen.
Okay, but you know what? To the listener, and we appreciate him interjecting with us, I want to know, and I'll even put it out to you if you want to call us at 604-280-1040. What do the Blue Jays have to do to bring Vladimir Guerrero up and let them play with a big club? Because there is going to have to be some shuffling and some navigating and all that kind of stuff that comes up with it. But, again, you got a guy that is practically hitting 400 at Double-A, and it's been a month. So you can make the case that you could bring him up. I know that he's young. I don't know if it's the right move controllability-wise from a contractual standpoint. But, again, if I'm manager John Gibbons, I could care less about contracts. I just want the best 9 guys that could put the ball in play and help me get some wins. But you've got to navigate those waters.
I think it's going to have to take an injury or two for that to happen if you want Guerrero up fairly soon. But, I mean, as things stand right now, if Donaldson, knock on wood, stays healthy and hits like he's been hitting since his return in this doubleheader today, then, yeah, you might be waiting a while yet before Vladdy comes up.
He cannot have another injury this season.
Oh, God.
Josh Donaldson,
no.
I don't care if, he trips on a tripwire. He's got to play that game because he just cannot afford in a free agent year to go down again, and the Blue Jays can't afford to not have him. You see the immediate return on investment today in a game against Cleveland. As you said, Niley had a couple of long balls, double off the wall as well. He's seeing the ball, he's hitting the ball, and he's got a lot of ground to make up. Earlier this month, this radio station, actually I got to go back in April, get it. We had Brett Laurie on the station. We had Matthew Sakaris, Blake Price. We're having a conversation with him. Brett Laurie was one of those guys at, I guess 2009, 2010, was really a centerpiece for the Toronto Blue Jays. Then, of course, he was traded for the aforementioned Josh Donaldson, and it just seemed to begin a spiral for Brett Laurie. He went from Oakland to the White Sox, and then the White Sox, just at the beginning of the season 2 years ago, were willing to just let him go for nothing. They just opted him out of his contract and just said, whatever it takes, you're out of here. He has not played Major League Baseball since. Heck, he hasn't played minor league baseball since. He's dealing with a back that I guess conventional medicine is just not cutting it. So now he's looking for any kind of way to get back into this game. Gentlemen, I've talked about a number of different players that went from being cornerstone pieces to a very quick exit stage left. But because he's a local guy, I mean, Brett Laurie comes from our stock. How interesting is this that he goes from marquee guy to out of baseball and nobody's even kicking tires on Brett Laurie?
Yeah, it's an unbelievable fall from grace. I mean, he was a big reason. Well, one of the big reasons they were able to get Josh Donaldson out of Oakland, along with Franklin Barreto, and that was speaking of Barreto, that's what I was upset about. I mean, you had to give up something to get something, but no, it's unbelievable what's happened with Brett Laurie. You know, He loves his Red Bull. He's a very intense player. He goes all out, sometimes to his own detriment. He wound up nearly killing himself on a couple of foul balls down the third base side. And, and maybe as well, I mean, it's also been rumored, maybe not the greatest clubhouse fit, that maybe he's just a little too intense, for his teammates.
I don't want to step on somebody here, but the truth of the matter is when you look at his 6 years in Major League Baseball, quite frankly speaking, what we expected and what we were hoping him to become was considerably different from what he actually was on the field.
How so?
I mean, really, if you look at his numbers, and we're talking about really the only time he actually had an outstanding offensive season was year number 1 in 150 at-bats. After that, he basically became a below-average offensive third baseman. We wanted him to succeed because he's Canadian. He's playing for the Blue Jays. But really, at the end of the day, he topped out at 16 home runs. That's okay for a third baseman. 60 RBIs, that's not too bad, and that's in a 600 plate appearance season. We wanted him to be better, but the truth of the matter is that unfortunately, although he's a Major League Baseball player, and there's not a lot of those, he really was a below-average player with a big personality. And being in Canada, we saw that big personality. We saw him go running into the stands. I mean, but at the end of the day, really, for a Major League ball player, he just really wasn't anything special.
Fair enough. That's a good point. All right, we'll take a break here. Hour 1 in the books, Hour 2 on the way. We will recap some of the big stories of the day. Toronto Blue Jays look like they're going to split their doubleheader today. But again, on the other side, we're going to recap it. We're going to start with Ichiro Suzuki. Retired? It's almost like when the anchorman, Will Ferrell, looked into the teleprompter. There was a question mark at the end of the word. I don't understand it. I'm not sure. So the four of us, Lou Filippo, KP Wee, Niall O'Donohoe, and myself, are going to try and figure out just what the heck happened with Ichiro Suzuki, who today kind of retired, but not really. This is Rob Fay Nation Radio and also Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. Second hour of Vancouver Canadians Game Day. I am joined by Niall O'Donohoe, KP Wee, Lou Filippo, as we bring you the bullpen session. Second hour we dedicated to just being a couple of guys hanging out, talking baseball. And again, we'd love to hear from you at 604-280-1040. If you want to text us tonight at 104040, feel free to do so. Deep in Merit is not giving up on his argument. He says, I'm not saying this all at once. Now, of course, if you were listening to the last segment, Deep started off by saying that he thought that maybe you could move a couple of assets around to try to get Vladdy into the lineup. He says, I'm not saying to do this all at once. Vladdy can come later on, but I do, in the meantime, see Tulo as a third baseman at this point in his career. Young Tulo was long, lanky, and agile and could pick balls out of the dirt all day. Right now, he's going to break down playing shortstop. His body's changed. His lower half is a little more thick, now built like a third baseman. Strong arm, but it might not be a fit with the Jays. So he fast forward, he says, and why can't Donaldson play right field? He's a C-plus defender at third base. You could affect the game from right field. Tony Gwynn, Ichiro, proof of that. Right now, the Jays are playing for third in the division. It's time to sell high on Donaldson. You will get a king's ransom. Bring in Vladdy. Hashtag big moves. Thanks for reading my texts. So I don't know where to begin with this one, but again, the conversation started with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It's tough to keep him in the minors when he's got the gaudy numbers that he does, but again, the argument can be made that he's 19. So KP, I'll start with you. Lou and Niall are chomping at the bit to get in on this, so I'll start with the voice of reason before we open up the doors of the floodgates. But obviously, multiple challenges there. Vladimir, I don't even know if we'll ever see Tulowitzki at full steam ahead again. I think we get him kind of at 70% of what we got him even when he first came to Toronto or what he was with the Colorado Rockies. I don't think hell or high water you'll get Josh Donaldson anywhere else other than third, based on the fact that he's going into a free agent year where he wants to show well, and surely he's not going to let ownership move him around or management or what have you. And Vladdy, the third piece of this conversation, I don't even know where you put him if you bring him up. You can't. I don't know if he's an everyday player. Do you just bring him up on the bench? Are you stunting his growth by taking it bats away from him? What do you think?
Oh, Rob, if you're going to bring up Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you've got to play him at least regularly, not have him sit on a bench because he could be, getting his at-bats in the minors. But if you decide to bring him up, you got to play him. And I don't think DH is where you would put a young player. He's 19 years old. So he would have to play his position, third base, and then what would you do with Donaldson? Have him DH? Again, if you're trying to win, why do you have a guy who's hitting 200, Candres Morales, being your designated hitter? If you want to win, you want to be competitive, bring this kid up and put him at third base. Convince Donaldson that for his health, he can't afford to have another injury, as you said earlier.
But you can't do that in a free agent year to a guy that's an MVP and been the face of your franchise. I mean, I understand where you're going. Now, ironically, of all of us here at the table, there's only one guy that is a true bona fide author. KP writing a book about the 1980 Dodgers and, of course, the great year that they had. And we actually have a call. Somebody wants to talk Dodgers. So, KP, this might be right in your wheelhouse. Casey in Vancouver. Casey, good evening. How are you, fella?
Hey, guys. How you guys doing?
So far, so good.
So I'm Blue Jays fan number 1A, but 1B, I'm a Dodgers fan. I think right now they have one of the most interesting predicaments in the major leagues regarding all of their injuries and currently being 7 games back of the Diamondbacks in their division and kind of winning 1-2 games and losing the following 3. So with the Corey Seager being shut down, with Tommy John, and then injuries to Donaldson, Kohler in the bullpen, and Yasiel Puig, as well as Ryu in the rotation. There's kind of though they have a deep prospect pool, there's been rumors that maybe they would try to go after Machado, and I was just curious what you guys thought of that. Personally, I'm against that, for 2 reasons, because though Corey is gone, Seager that is gone for the whole year, he will be back this time next year most likely. And he's going to be your long-term shortstop. So why do you want to sell your farm? Because the Orioles are going to want at least 2 of the top 5 top prospects that the Dodgers have, which would definitely be one of them would be Walker Buehler, which is supposed to be their future ace. So personally, what I think the Dodgers are doing is just going to let things ride this year and hope for the best. And as they're resetting their luxury tax thresholds, I think what they might do in the offseason is try and make a big run at Bryce Harper, which would then therefore make Yasiel Puig perhaps trade bait as he was a couple of years ago. So I'm just curious about what you guys thought about that. There's pros and cons with either side of that, but let the experts have their take.
All right. Appreciate the phone call, Casey. Lou, I'll let you take first shot at this.
Well, first off, it was certainly a really, really good move in the preseason to make that deal with Atlanta to give them that space where they're not going to go into the luxury tax. But when you have this many injuries occur, the only thing you can really do is kind of suck it up and say, okay, you know what, guys? This isn't our year. This is not a team you want to blow up. I mean, I was reading stuff today. Is it time to trade Clayton Kershaw? No, it is not time to trade Clayton Kershaw. These things happen, unfortunately, to some teams every once in a while. Hold tight. They're going to have the money. Next year, they'll be fine.
I'll tell you what, I think, it's still early in the season. The Dodgers, I know there's, 7 back. I know they did beat the Diamondbacks today, finally stopping the Diamondbacks from winning a series for the first time this season. But you know what? Maybe you do pull the trigger on getting Manny Machado. You'd have basically the entire year to try and convince him, hey, you know what? Los Angeles would be a great place for you, and you can make it work with Corey Seager coming back. Because Seager, there's the talk about him was he going to stay at shortstop long term? And maybe they move him over to third. And I'll tell you what a left side of the infield that would be, Machado and Seager. So, you know what? Maybe that might be something worth exploring if you're the Dodgers.
Well, I think there are a couple of things to consider here, and one being this being the 60th anniversary of the Dodgers having moved from Brooklyn to L.A. So you think that they want to get to the postseason and win the first World Championship since '88, which would have been like 30 years ago. So there's that to consider, and you would think that they want to make the right moves to compete. But then again, we're still on May 3rd today. It's still early. Injuries do happen. You just got to suck it up. You just got to say, hey, it's just unfortunate that this year things aren't going our way. Last season, it seemed like everything went their way, and maybe this is one of those years where you just got to say, look, we're not going to make any drastic moves. This is a one-off. Just see how things play out the rest of the season. I wouldn't trade Kershaw. I wouldn't make any moves, any drastic moves, because again, the injury situation is just one of those unlucky seasons. And even last season, when they had those injuries with the pitching staff, they somehow were able to win a lot of the games. It didn't matter if Rich Hill was injured or if some of the other guys on the starting rotation went down. They always found a way last season to make things happen. Maybe this year, they're going to try the same approach. Don't blow things up. Just see what happens.
And I believe Justin Turner, I don't know if he's back yet, but I believe he's nearing a return. So that's something else the Dodgers can maybe hang their hat on, because he was a big part of their team last year.
Correct. He was a huge part of their team. Now, there's, I guess, with cause and effect, Dave Roberts says that Hyunjin Ryu's groin muscle tore off the bone. So he's gone at least till the second half of the season.
Yep.
So Casey brought up a good point. He says Walker Buehler, who is the next big thing coming up, the homegrown talent, is probably the guy that's going to come in and take that void. But the reality is when you pull the lens back on the Dodgers, the problem that you have here is A, expectation, B, a team that's right up against the luxury tax because they went to build and spend to get a winner, and now all of a sudden you got some pretty significant pieces that are missing. So to bring this all back, if in fact this season doesn't work and you need to do a bit of a shuffle on the fly, you've got some pretty interesting pieces that some teams would really like. Yasiel Puig is one. I know that Clayton Kershaw is off limits. I think, if anything, they throw the Brinks truck at him and say, name your price. But they've also got some 1A players that I could see becoming very quickly available, because the reality is the Dodgers aren't like small market teams where you could sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to recede for a couple of years and figure this out. They're going to go. They're going to empty their pockets as quickly as they can, and then they're going to go to the ATM and refill their pockets. So they're an interesting study, because I can't put them in the usual conversation with about, 70% of the teams in baseball. I just, if I'm the Dodgers and I'm 10 back, that always has been the magic number for me. If you're 10 games back at any point in the season, it's not going to happen. And you know what? You say that in short season baseball, that if you ever fall 5 games back, that's the buffer. 10 games, especially in a pretty competitive division like that. But here's the injuries right now for the Dodgers. You got everybody from Corey Seager, Justin Turner. Now you can add Ryu to that conversation. And that's before you get into the Logan Forsythe and Rich Hill, who is on the DL. Julio Urias is on the DL or coming off of it shortly. This is as banged up a team as you'll find anywhere in Major League Baseball with key pieces, and I just wonder if they try to fight the good fight or if this isn't a fire sale in the making.
Well, they certainly have some veteran players that you could see them moving if it doesn't get any better. But, the heart of that team is actually still fairly young, and you certainly don't want to do anything crazy with any of those guys or get desperate. Like the whole idea of Machado is certainly a long-term thing, because he's a young player. So that's not a shot in the
Hold
dark.
a thought on this one, because Machado is top dollar. To me, Machado is the top third baseman available in the free agent class, with all due respect to Josh Donaldson.
Or shortstop.
Exactly. You can put him anywhere. How do I say this properly? Josh Donaldson might be, according to some of the free agent pool, a poor man's Manny Machado. If I'm right now the Toronto Blue Jays and I realize that I'm not bringing him back, would you not try to extract a top-end prospect from the Dodgers and send him back to the West Coast? I mean, that for me is a pretty interesting dance partner, because the Dodgers are actually loaded when it comes to certain parts of their system. And if you could get Walker Buehler in exchange for Josh Donaldson, would you not think of what's coming over the horizon if you bring in a guy like Walker Buehler, and then you have Nate Pearson, and then you have TJ Zoik and Sean Reed Foley and a handful of guys that are on the cusp to add to Aaron Sanchez, Marcus Stroman. That all of a sudden becomes an embarrassment of riches. Even though I do think 2 years from now the Blue Jays will not have Aaron Sanchez in-house.
One of those two guys will be gone in all likelihood. But I think if you're going to move Donaldson, the Jays aren't too bad on the pitching side. They certainly have some position players with potential in the farm. But if I'm moving Donaldson, I want an everyday Major League ready infielder in return.
But you have Vladdy on the horizon. Vladdy, to me, makes Josh Donaldson somewhat expendable.
But let's go around the horn here in the infield for the
Well,
Jays.
sure, but you're not looking. I guess what I'm saying is you're not looking position for position.
No,
you
not
don't need a third
necessarily.
baseman
No,
in
no.
return for Josh
First
Donaldson.
baseman, second baseman, shortstop. Tulo's only got a couple of years left. Like, that's the truth.
I think he's done.
But-
I think Troy Tulowitzki is done as a major league star.
But he's not going anywhere.
Well, no, because they got to eat that monstrously embarrassing
Exactly.
contract.
So they start to need building up some of their everyday position players as well. There's certainly some guys on the horizon.
Gee, I
but,
don't know, man.
I think pitching is
can
starting
never
to
have enough
become.
pitching.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Now the problem with that is, though, okay, on the other side of that is that pitching, unfortunately, is becoming less and less reliable as the guys age. I mean, you can see what's happening now, and it's happened with the Jays. You're talking about a rotation of guys that 2 years ago, all of them were under 4. Right now, none of them are under 4, and 3 of them are on the high side of 6 in 2 years. We've seen this happen with other major league teams. The Mets, 3 years ago, half that staff disappeared in the middle of the season. Bye-bye.
Hypothetically, if we were to do this time machine thing, and KP, I'll throw this to you. In 2 years, it could be fair to say that you would have Vladdy Guerrero Jr. at third base, Bo Bichette as your heir apparent at short. You could make a case for a couple of guys over at second base, including Loris Gurriel. And this is, again, with all due respect to the guys that are currently there, that are, a part of the conversation right now. The only thing that I could say is maybe you move Vladdy to first and then you're looking for somebody over at third base. But the reality is this young core is all coming up together, all exceeding expectations, and all look like they are going to be Major League Baseball players one day. So, KP, I sit around and I say, okay, I've got a former American League MVP, a guy that we're not going to pay top dollar for, who's still going to get a 3 to 4 year contract at $25-26 million a year. I'd be shocked if he didn't. Are you moving Josh Donaldson, or are you moving all that youth around him to make sure that they at least have that one anchor in the infield before we just totally sell our soul to the youth?
I know, guys at this round table here are gonna say that you got to trade him before the deadline because the Blue Jays are not gonna, possibly not gonna contend this season. Once the All-Star break hits, I don't know. I don't know why you would want to trade. What message are you sending to the fan base? Again, we had a discussion in the first hour about the Mariners, where I know we're not talking about the same thing, but the Mariners having Ichiro quote unquote retire suddenly, abruptly, and we're talking about perhaps trading away Felix Hernandez because because you're going to pass on the torch to James Paxton. The same thing here. What do you think the fan base is going to think? You're giving up on the season, and I don't think the Blue Jays are going to contend this year. But how are you going to sell it to the fan base that we're giving up on the season with With
are you giving up on the season by trading Josh Donaldson?
Well, like you said, he's former MVP. He's had a big day. Coming off the DL, he still can hit.
I think you have to preach the future. I mean, if you're the Blue Jays, you have to focus on the future. I mean, heck, you're seeing two great examples now, arguably the two best teams in Major League Baseball, the Houston Astros, Chicago Cubs. Big teardown, built it right back up. And and you just get the impression that Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins, they are just itching to really put this rebuild in full motion. I mean, it's been half measures to this point, but I'll tell you what, I don't think they're going to contend either. I mean, they're off to a great start, and I hope they keep it up, but I don't see them hanging around in this race. I think the Yankees and Red Sox are too good. And, yeah, I think that's how you have to preach it to the Toronto fan base. Look, we have to look towards the future. We have to get prospects who are going to help us in the future.
I always say that baseball's timing. And I look up and I say, if you can't beat the top two teams in your division, then you're good as ready to rebuild. You have to rebuild, because if you can't compete with these two, and even the Yankees receded for a little bit. Even they stepped back and got the luxury tax down and made sure that they could, build. And did they build with some great trades with the Cubs.
Mm-hmm.
And But they had the assets to make those trades, which is part of the reason that they were able to do it a little quicker than most. But I look at the Toronto Blue Jays and I say to myself, okay, if I am at best a second wild card team, at best, then I'm ready to trade some assets, because timing-wise says that as good as Boston is also a little long in the tooth. With the exception of, Mookie Betts and Xavier Bogaerts. So then all of a sudden I say to myself, okay, so they're good for another 2 years. The Yankees are the team that I don't think I'm going to catch for the foreseeable future because they're lock-loaded, and you know what? Believe it or not, they've got a pretty good young core. So if I start my rebuild now, by the time that all of a sudden Boston decides that they're going to have to start their rebuild in 2 years, unless they decide to spend, I can actually catch that wave to shore at the right time. But it's all about, when are my prospects going to be ready? When am I able to make that push? And for me, timing-wise, with the Toronto Blue Jays shows they're 4 years away, because you're going to have the Nate Pearsons of the world. You're going to have a few guys that are, with a season or two under their belt, probably 2021. I mean, they don't just come up and all of a sudden you're a playoff team. You got to get a couple of seasons under the belt and then really make a run. You get the pieces that are right at the right time, and away you go. But timing is so key for this one right now. And I think that the longer the Blue Jays hang on to this notion that they're truly a contender, the longer it's going to take them to begin this rebuild and really catch that timing and get on that conveyor belt just at the right time. And it kind of reminds me in a weird way of how the Canucks refused to go into that, well, we think we can still kind of sneak in and maybe squeeze out one more year. And all it did was put off what we knew was going to happen, which now we're actually taking a part of, and the fans actually buy into the rebuild. I think if you go to the Toronto faithful and say, listen, this is where we're at. He's gone. We're going to get as much in return as we can. We might lose a couple of pieces along the way, but the cavalry's on its way, and here's my 3 to 5 year plan. I actually think people in Canada would be just fine with it.
I mean, they've gone through it before many, many times where they've actually flipped the roster over. So I don't think there's a problem with the Toronto baseball fan accepting that because they have gone through it before. But yeah, the key is, when do you make that decision and say, okay, now we have to try and start to divest ourselves of players that, when we are ready to contend, are either not going to be around or of no use to us. And it's better that you start early than start late.
Well, you're just talking about this a moment ago, Rob, about timing. And I want to talk about timing in terms of, like, at what point do you pull the plug? Let's say how many games out of the second wild card are we talking here? Are we talking 3 games out of the second wild card? Are we
5?
5? All right. Well, I mean, if you're within 5 games, and depending on how late in the season that is, again, timing is key. Obviously, if you're not in contention, of course, you would start moving, pieces around, moving players. But again, the timing is crucial. If you are still in the thick of the second wild card race, or the race for the second wild card spot, I don't see why, from a perspective of wanting to get into the playoffs where anything can happen.
But KP, and we're up against the clock, unfortunately. We'll pick this up on the other side, but my only fear is that you don't get anything in return for Josh Donaldson. Fans hate nothing more than not getting a return on an asset, and that is the fear, that if you don't sign him, then you trade him. And if you don't have an answer going into the offseason, and all of a sudden you watch him walk out the front door with all your nothing coming back in return, that's a problem. All right, we'll take a break here. We have to break at this point. We'll get a couple commercials in. When we come back, we'll pick up this conversation, and then we will also say, okay, we know that this Toronto Blue Jays organization is going to change over. We know here in Vancouver just what the minor league system looks like. It's bared a lot of fruit here in Vancouver over the past 5 or 6 years. Can they do this internally, or will at some point they have to go outside of this organization? You're listening to Rob Fay Nation Radio. You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day. You're doing it tonight on TSN 1040. That is Lou Filippo. That is Niall O'Donohoe. And that is KP Wee. I'm Rob Fay. Welcome back to Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Working our way up towards 9 o'clock before we switch gears, do a little Rob Fay Nation Radio talk about all of the sports around us. But as we get back into the baseball conversation, something continues to gain a little bit of steam behind the scenes, the possibility of a DH in the National League. Now, this is not something that I've told any of these young gentlemen about, so we're going to kind of take this one just off the top of the dome. And, I think of how much I've enjoyed watching the DH and how it extends careers, i.e. Edgar Martinez, i.e. Paul Molitor, but I also love the integrity of the National League game, where you get the opportunity to see the pitcher do some stuff or not do some stuff. I'm not even 100% sure that I've ever decided if I'm one way or the other. I think I've been spoiled because I get the best of both worlds when I see the American and the National League. But The National League right now is, well, I shouldn't say the National League. Major League Baseball is really starting to kick tires on the possibility of making all of Major League Baseball designated hitter friendly. So I will go around the horn with all you guys in no particular order. Yes or no? Should the National League institute the designated hitter?
No, absolutely not. You know what? Honestly, that's the way the game should be played. You have 9 men on the field, and the same 9 men should be in the batting order as well. I'm a huge fan of National League style baseball, even though, yes, I am a Blue Jays fan first and foremost. And one thing I would have loved to have seen Major League Baseball do, when interleague play, started up, why not give American League, why not switch it around? Have the pitchers bat in American League parks just to kind of mix it up a little bit. I mean,
just to show it up.
Yeah, just to show it up. I mean, and you know what? It's fun keeping score of games in National Leagues because you have double switches.
Got to work, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Unless
awesome.
you're the one actually doing handling the scorebook.
Yes.
I love the fact that the pitchers pitch, but the truth of the matter is it's the only league in the world now that still actually allows the pitcher to hit. And really,
I think in the Eastern League Eastern League, I don't know if they have changed this rule, but I know in AA, if it's 2 National League teams going at it, the pitcher still bats. I believe.
I'm not sure on that one either.
Yeah.
But
That makes
I mean,
two of
I
us.
love the idea of them hitting. However, I think it would also be a lot of fun to see kickers in football kick with their wrong foot as well. So it would certainly make the game more interesting.
How do you really feel?
So, but you know what, though? Honestly, I think for the sake of just uniformity, I think they should just go to the DH. And I am going to miss the strategy of the National League pitcher. But you know what, guys? They're all playing the same game at the same level. Either they both go to a DH or they both eliminate the DH. The whole idea of the 2 different rules is kind of silly.
I think having having pitchers hit would be great, just because again we're talking about this is how baseball should be played. It's like having the manager make decisions. Hey, do I take this pitcher out right now? He's gone. He's giving me 6 innings, but we're down by a run. Or should I leave him in there for another inning, let him bat? So there's a lot of strategy involved here. I think a lot of baseball fans still enjoyed that strategy aspect of it, because in the American League with the DH, you're just 1 to 9. There's not really a lot of strategy happening except for how you manage the bullpen. And then National League with the pitchers hitting, it's more of a chess match, if you will. A lot of strategy, a lot of double switching, perhaps pinch hitting for the pitcher early on. If you think that we can have like a big inning offensively, if we bring in a pinch hitter to hit, so a lot more going on in the National League game with no DH.
I love all that strategy. I really, really do. But what was the old commercial with Maddox and Glavine and Mark?
Chicks dig long ball.
Chicks dig long ball. Okay, and you know what? Guys dig it too. I want to see offense. You want to make this game cool. And the truth of the matter is, when you put a guy at the plate, he's got a bat in his hand. His job is to hit the ball, not to protect his throwing arm by dropping into a bunt stance while wearing a winter jacket.
Well, that's why we need more guys like Shohei Ohtani who can do
exactly.
both, or Madison
Bumgarner.
Bumgarner.
That increases their value, though. I mean, because they can actually pinch hit and stuff like that. But it's like I said, for the uniformity of the game, I think it's the time has come where they have to make up their mind. And honestly, I love the idea that pitchers hit, but it makes absolutely no sense in 2018.
Well, then why not go the other way? Why not have the American League go back before it was in 1973 when they instituted the DH rule? Why not have the pitchers bat again in the AL?
I don't think a union would ever go for that, quite frankly.
I think
because
whatever
it costs them a job.
Yeah, I think whatever it takes to get Bartolo into the batter's box.
Oh, that
There
would
you
be
go.
good. That would be
Could
good.
you imagine? He's hit a couple of home runs in his lifetime,
Yeah.
has he not?
Yeah.
But the association would never go for that because your DH is going to make 20 times what your number 13 pitcher is going to make. So the union would never go for the idea of the DH being eliminated in the American League. It's a non-starter because it's a big salary position.
It is a very big salary position, but again, when you have one league that has it and one league that doesn't, to me, that's the sexiness of the, you get the diversity of it. You get the one that has it, the one that doesn't. You get a scoop of vanilla, a scoop of chocolate. Like, for me, that's just fine. And every once in a while they cross over, and then you get to see the American League struggle with the National League team's ways and vice versa. So for me, I've got no issue with it. And I wouldn't mind a good stretch with Major League Baseball stopping with all the changes. Yeah. We've had so many changes over the last 5 to 10 years. How about you're just cool for a little while? Go sort something out. See, the problem with here's my beef with the game is you've got a boardroom full of guys back in New York or wherever they're all situated, and they're all thinking about how can I justify my job? I've got this 6-figure job. I'm living in Manhattan. God, I got to do something to show my value. Oh, I know. Let's put a clock in or limit visits to the mound or, insert technical change here.
Or get rid of the intentional walk.
Well, to me, it's just, come on, guys. Like, let's figure it out. This game's been around for 125 years.
It's done pretty good.
It's done not too bad. So,
right,
the reason being is I watched early the Jays and the Cleveland Indians. I got a bit to a late start today, and I still caught the first couple of innings. And there was a visit to the mound, and there's Buck and Pat, and they're like, oh, there's visit number 1. And I thought to myself, man, you know what? Come on. Are we really at the point where we're counting visits to the mound by a catcher who's going out to just quell his young arm to make sure that they can get on the same page? I mean, that to me, you got the clock, you got all this stuff to save 6 minutes in a baseball game?
Well, you know what? I think it's basically all because of Jorge Posada. I think you can blame him because he liked to visit them out every single freaking pitch. I mean,
it's like Ortiz stepping out of the box for 35 minutes.
Yeah, like 5-hour games between the Yankees and Red Sox.
I don't disagree with you at all, Rob, in terms of what you've got is a whole bunch of people making decisions, and they've got something in front of them that is really, 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 really good. While they're busy trying to chase the new fan, what they're in the process of doing is alienating the actual loyal fan.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, you're not going to gain more than you lose. I mean, okay, I guess you will based on attrition and age, but you're not going to gain that fan by turning it into a video game because they're already playing a video game.
There are certain parts of the game that I like. Like, I've actually become enamored with launch angle, exit velocity, certain analytics that at first I was like, oh, God, but it does make sense. We had a guy named Sean Ramjeg, very good friend of mine. He's an executive director with EA Sports for their NHL hockey. And he's had conversations with some of the major networks who want their broadcast to mirror what EA Sports is doing, because EA Sports has the 360 ability. It has all these different angles that a lot of parks and a lot of arenas haven't really gone to yet. So now they see it in this video game package and they're like, God, we'd love to try that. Like, what made you conceptually think of this? So those are the technical advances that I'm totally okay looking at and seeing and making it a part of the broadcast. Even if you went to a split screen, which some people were saying that the best way to watch baseball in 2018 is through 3 different screens. You know how they'll have your main screen on the left side. They'll have a split screen. So it's kind of like the Brady Bunch intro where you have the big screen off to the left and then you have a couple of secondary screens on the right. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, well, why on earth would I want to do that? But one camera's on the action, one camera's on the bullpen, one camera's on the base runner at first, one camera's on, something else. I don't know. That's the way that this is going to end up looking. Gone are the days of the traditional, broadcast and the traditional media. Now you're going to have the opportunity to watch multiple angles all at the same time, if you so choose.
And kind of like with Facebook today, I mean, they have the Dodgers and Diamondbacks game on Facebook. And, of course, you have a big chat there on the right-hand side of the screen. Yeah. So, I mean, there's so much going on at once. But, yeah, it looks like that's definitely going to be the way of the future.
I have a hard time imagining paying attention to 3 screens for 300 pitches when 255 of them do absolutely nothing. Like, that's the one thing about the traditional over-the-shoulder baseball shot. And I handled the cameras at Nat Bailey for quite a few years, and I know what it's like to have nothing happen for 85% of the game. And it's just a different game. It's the one game, and I've said this before, that you cannot film if you even tried with one camera and get anything good out of it. Any other sport you can film with one camera. Might not be great, but you'll actually catch the game. Baseball, there is a lot going on, but it all starts in one spot. And that really is the focus, is the pitcher and the catcher and the batter. And then once contact is made, then, well, heck, you have no idea where the ball's going or what it's gonna do. But that is the focus of the game. I can't get that with baseball. And I used to actually look at the game that way. And really, you're talking about a whole lot of waste and distracting attention from what you should be selling, which is that battle that occurs 300 times a game.
Well, as baseball does their thing to
Yeah.
try and, of course, speed it up, networks are trying to do the same thing,
Yeah.
which makes Facebook really intriguing because, as you said, Niall, there's interaction. Now, KP, we brought this up, and you know what? Not everybody was huge on Facebook and the way that they have these, conversations on the screen where you can type pretty much everything.
Well, first of all, you have a Facebook game. You're gonna probably lose a lot of the the guys that or the fans that choose not to have a Facebook account because they have no idea where the game's being broadcast. They are not, for whatever reason, it's their choice. They don't have a Facebook account. You're missing out on these fans, and it's just, again, interacting with all that. Are we watching a baseball game or are we chatting? I don't know, what are we watching here? So I got to agree with Lou here in terms of having all these split screens, having interaction. Are we watching a baseball game or are we doing like a video chat or are we doing like a video game?
But
Let's
who
stay-
are we
are
turning
you
the
trying to sell?
Well, that's kind of the issue here.
Well, that
like,
is the
I
issue.
understand they're trying to sell a younger, a new fan. But if you're going to turn the real game into an e-game where you sit around with your headset, mama's basement, downstairs.
That's not baseball anymore.
That's not, I mean, you're not going to, that is not going to get you any dollars for your advertisers.
I couldn't disagree more. And the reason that advertisers love this is because they get instant analytics, which in this industry, you don't do business without somebody saying how many clicks, how many tweets, what's your traffic, all that kind of stuff that conventional television just cannot give you. They give you some broad stroke numbers, same as in radio. TSN gets the ratings. All the other stations of the city get the ratings, but who the hell knows where those come from? Whereas an analytics person that has to go and report to their boss at, 1 Bloor Street or whatever, place in Manhattan is, they can say, okay, we're doing our business with Facebook because we know exactly when this came up. We know exactly when our logo was there. We know who's watching. We know their age groups, their area codes, all that information that is still up in cyberspace. Like, where is it? That's why Mark Zuckerberg is in front of Congress.
That makes me want to watch.
Well, you as a fan
Yes.
might not want to watch.
Yeah.
But let's be honest. As I mentioned, I have 2 kids who bury their face in their cell phones all day long. And I'm sorry, but Facebook is the new medium as far as, trust me, we'll have this conversation, the 4 of us, 5 years from now, and I guarantee you they've gotten a much bigger share of Major League Baseball.
Oh, yeah.
They will also, just like the other big brands that are starting, like Amazon and Hulu and all those places are starting to look and kick tires on UFC and NFL and all that stuff, I promise you that this isn't going away because everybody follows the money. And I guarantee you it's like terrestrial radio and satellite radio. Everybody thought that satellite was this harebrained scheme. They actually now have 11 million subscribers. You don't think anybody in terrestrial radio wouldn't want a share of that? So to me, this is the fear that I have. Is the fear is I'm becoming a curmudgeonly old man that sits there and says, I would never watch a game on Facebook. I don't understand Facebook. But at the end of the day, that's where the medium is going because, again, that's where they want to spend their money, and that's where the broadcasts will end up. I honestly believe in my heart of hearts within 5 to 10 years, there will be at least 25% of all Major League Baseball games on Facebook.
I just wonder about the numbers, though. I think I saw, 38K, 39,000. So you have to wonder
But it's
how.
infancy. It's infancy.
Exactly. You have to wonder how patient MLB is going to be with Facebook. But, yeah, I agree. I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon.
And the other thing, and once again, I still have a hard time seeing this is how someone's going to sit there with their phone like this for 3.5 hours and watch a baseball
But you can
game.
put Facebook on your TV. I mean, it's
Or your iPad.
anywhere. I mean, it's instantaneous. I mean, I got a smart TV at home. I can watch whatever I want within 2 clicks of something.
Yeah,
I know.
I
know.
I'm still watching on my 12-inch black and white.
That's okay. All right, 8:42 in Vancouver. Final segment coming up. We call this one the bottom of the ninth. On the other way, we'll give you a scoreboard update in the world of baseball. We'll also let you know what's going on with some of the big teams and our local team here in Vancouver. You're listening to Vancouver Canadians Game Day on TSN. Major League Baseball about a month away from their draft. So, of course, Toronto Blue Jays, Seattle Mariners, everybody gets to restock the cupboards. Nobody's got a real big name pick this year. Everybody's going to be picking somewhere between... No, actually, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm thinking solely of the Toronto Blue Jays this year as far as the 2018 draft goes. I can't remember if the Mariners have a big boy watch. I'll have to figure it out because I was saying it, and then all of a sudden I thought about it. It goes Tigers, Giants, Phillies, White Sox, Reds, Mets, Padres. Okay, so they don't have a pick there. I was right the first time. I should have just shut my mouth, which in radio is not a recipe for success. KP Wee, Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donoghue, final segment of Vancouver Canadians Game Day powered by Booster Juice. We talk about the Vancouver Canadians who are essentially built through the Toronto Blue Jays draft. Some days it's day 1, some days it's day 2 or 3. But we've been lucky, been fortunate over the last couple of years to see some pretty good prospects. So we had this debate today at Nat Bailey Stadium, and I was like, man, I can't wait to get to the radio station. I'm going to save this one for last. Who's the best prospect to ever come out of Vancouver since the Vancouver Canadians hooked up with the Toronto Blue Jays in 2011? I'll throw some names at you. There's Aaron Sanchez. There is Noah Syndergaard, Kevin Pillar, Marcus Stroman, Roberto Osuna. I mean, I could give you a few more, but I think of the ones that have had immediate impact, those guys might be the big 5. So if you now look back, all of these guys came through the draft. All of these guys are homegrown for the most part. Who's your horse?
If I was going to pick one of those guys and say that's so far as the guy that I look at and say this is the one who's going to have the big ceiling, it's going to be Syndergaard. Just for a couple of reasons. Physically, he's a little bit stronger than the other two pitchers. And he just, I don't know, something about him just kind of screams out superstar. Now, the one name that wasn't on that list, and we should keep an eye out for, of course, is Franklin Barreto. I mean, because that guy was just sick as an 18-year-old, and he's still only 22.
He's with the wrong organization.
Yes, that is true.
I think he's going to get lost in the shuffle. I swear to God, Oakland's the worst place for Frankie B.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with Barreto because they called him up earlier this year and he saw one game and I think it was as a defensive replacement. So they basically let him rot on the bench for a week or two before they sent him back down.
He's got Altuve written all over him. He really does. If, of course, he's put in the right situation.
Okay, so we got one vote for Syndergaard, which I think is a pretty fair vote.
I was not here in 2011. You know what? I probably would agree with Syndergaard, but going for what I've seen, I got to go with Roberto Osuna because, for him when he was 17 when he reported to Vancouver and struck out 13, I believe, in his very first start.
In Everett.
Yeah. And he was just dynamite in the playoffs as well. You know what? I'd have to go with Roberto Osuna. And look at the way he transformed himself.
100 Major League saves and counting already.
Yes.
So at the Major League level.
I'd have to go with him.
KP?
I got to go with Syndergaard.
There we go.
I got to go with Syndergaard just because right now, according to MLB Network, he's like the 7th best pitcher in all of baseball, according to the little research and the list that they generated. I got to go with him. I mean, don't get me wrong, Osuna has done pretty well, 100 saves, as Rob mentioned, the youngest ever to reach that plateau. But, I mean, we're talking about the best out of the group that you mentioned. I got to go with Syndergaard. I think he's going to be an ace in the big leagues for a while.
He's an ace already.
Yeah,
he's an ace already on that staff. And, I mean, if he hadn't lost a chunk of last year, who knows what we'd be talking about. He's a special player. He's a special player.
Very quick story about Roberto Osuna. We're in Tri-City, Washington, and the Canadians are riding a 7-game winning streak. And pitchers in the I don't know if they do this major league level, but in the minors, you get the starting pitcher gets to pick what jersey you're going to wear. So the Canadians had a couple of choices. They could go with the traditional gray road uniform or the black one. Well, we had won all of our games in the black jersey, so they asked Roberto just before they decide what they're going to put on, what are you going to wear? And he goes, gray. And everybody's like, oh, no. We're wearing black today. And Roberto's like, no, gray. So the Canadians put on their grays because that's what the starting pitcher wants and get rocked. So the very next day, true story, very next day, and I'm in the clubhouse watching this, they all put Roberto Osuna on a chair in the middle of the clubhouse floor, strip him down to his boxer shorts, and every player on the team put something from their locker that they weren't afraid to burn. And they had a seance in the middle of the Tri-City clubhouse. They didn't light a fire, so they hammered him with water. Then they hammered him with baby powder and made a complete mess of the clubhouse. But that was his inauguration. That, by the way, next time you're riding a 7-game winning streak, you wear the jersey that we all wore leading up to it. He was 17, chubby kid, bad haircut. I didn't know he was going to turn into the player that he did. I mean, I looked at Noah Syndergaard back in 2011, and I'm like, that's a major leaguer.
Well, everyone assumed Osuna was going to be a starter. I mean, the fact that they threw him into that role, I mean, very, very young. I mean, they brought him up when he was...
Along with Miguel Castro.
Well, that was Castro's role, and Castro lost it because he crapped the bed. He couldn't get it done. And then Osuna, who his blood pressure never goes above like 80. I mean, he's pretty impressive. KP, you've been there for a majority of this. Of the last couple of years, is there a guy that could make a run at any of the names that we've been chewing the fat on?
Oh, that put me on the spot here.
Nate Pearson's the only guy that comes to mind for me. That I can look at immediately and say, that's a major leaguer.
I'll go with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of
anybody. You just
that
never
would
know.
match those guys,
Let's take today the winning pitcher today, Tim Meza. He was here in 2014.
I did not have him at all.
No, I mean, he was left-handed. He threw hard, but boy, he just couldn't. He had no control. But he's improved it enough to get to the big leagues.
Dude, he stunk in Vancouver. He was not good at all. When I saw Tim Meza come out of the bullpen, I'm like, oh no, dude. There's always one guy. I can name them every year. There's one guy that when the bullpen door swings open, you're like, God, I hope it's not. Oh, it's him.
But the thing is, left-handed, throws hard. So that's going to buy you a bit
Zach
of
Wazalewski was my first one who I danced with the devil on.
2008, I recall once in the middle of a game, you said, if they bring him in, I'm going off the air. And they brought him in.
Yeah, I think you're right. I should admit that.
I'm trying to remember who that was.
No, there's always a couple guys. The big door opens, and you're just like, Christ, here we go. It's going to be a walkathon, and they know it. You know it. The whole stadium knows it. Tim Breckbuehler was one. We had Bobby Eveld. Last year, Bobby Eveld, who was a 4-year starter at the University of Central Florida as a quarterback, Southern Florida or Central Florida, looked like an absolute star.
Yeah.
But it was like watching a judge throw a gavel from the front of a courthouse. You just knew it was going to miss the mark. And he was such a nice guy, like genuinely a sweet man, a sweet human being. But one of the worst things in the stadium is the video board. When you come into the game and you've got an ERA and it's like 10.73, I mean, talk about playing the loser's horn before you even get to the wheel and the price is right. It's like you're going over before you even spin it.
Man.
I don't know. But anyways, those are the beautiful things about baseball. And by the way, you know what's making a comeback in minor league and major league baseball right now? The bullpen card.
Bullpen card. Yes.
Which the Canadians have had under lock and key for the last 4 or 5 years.
And from some of the players I've talked to, they like the relievers. They love it. They absolutely love it. I mean, they really enjoy it. I'm trying to remember who it was. He said, "You know what? I think it was Jared Karkuff. He said if I could bring it out every game, I would."
Lou, I knew you were
I
going to do that
had
to
to
me.
look it up.
Sorry. Yeah, 2008, the guy who was going to leave was Ryan Tacker.
That's right.
Who, if memory serves me correct, walked 3 consecutive guys with the bases loaded.
He did. You get an ERA of 11. You've done a lot of bad stuff. But yeah, it was all like that. It's like you'd see him warming up, and it's like, okay.
I love doing the research on the former Vancouver Canadians. For example, Rodney Rutherford is now a jail guard, like a corrections officer.
Well, he had to build for it.
Yeah, he sure did. It's CO, as they call him in the hood. All right, KP Wee, Lou Filippo, Niall O'Donohoe, thank you for joining me here. We have to wrap this bad boy up. We will take a very quick break. Corey Basso will join me on the other side. We'll also have the coach joining us in the 10 o'clock hour. Oh, yeah, the coach. I'll let you know who that is on the other side. This has been Rob Fay Nation Radio combined with the Little Vancouver Canadians Game Day. Good night, gentlemen. We'll see you next Wednesday at 7 o'clock right here on TSN 1040.
This TSN 1040 podcast is powered by Metro Ford. It's hard to beat a Metro Ford deal in Fort Coquitlam and online at metromotors.com.